The emergency alert screamed through every communication device across the galaxy. 12 star systems had gone dark in the past month, leaving behind nothing but empty space where thriving colonies once existed. The attacks came without warning, without survivors, and without any trace of what had destroyed them. Admiral Thane paced through the corridors of Omega Point, the Coalition's largest space station. His forearms moved in nervous patterns as he reviewed the latest reports. The Altarians had lost their most advanced research facility. The Goliath homeworld's mining colonies had vanished overnight. Even the mysterious collective had suffered losses, their hive mind networks severed by whatever force was hunting them. The emergency council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of species gathered. General Lyra of the High Altarians floated gracefully into the room, her crystalline form catching the light as she moved. Her species had evolved on a world of perfect harmony, where conflicts were resolved through mathematical precision and elegant solutions. Chief Braun stomped in next, his massive frame barely fitting through the doorway. The Goliath warrior represented a species that had conquered their homeworld through sheer strength and honor-bound combat. Other delegates filed in, each bringing their own approach to warfare. The insectoid collective shared a single mind across millions of bodies. The energy-based Luminari could manipulate electromagnetic fields with thought alone. The aquatic depths dwellers had mastered underwater warfare in three-dimensional space. Every major military power in the galaxy had sent their best. Then Alex Rivers walked in. The human commander looked small compared to the other delegates. His simple gray uniform seemed primitive next to the advanced materials and energy fields that clothed the other species. He carried an old-fashioned datapad instead of the holographic displays others used. Most delegates barely glanced at him as he found a seat in the back row. Admiral Thane activated the central hologram, showing the locations where attacks had occurred. Red dots marked 12 systems, scattered across different sectors with no apparent pattern. "The enemy calls themselves the Void Wraiths," Thane began, his voice carrying the weight of desperation. "They appear without warning, phase between dimensions, and strike with surgical precision. Our best sensors cannot detect them until after they attack." General Lyra spoke first, her voice like musical chimes. "We must develop better detection arrays. Mathematical models can predict their movement patterns if we gather enough data points." Her suggestion was elegant, logical, and had already failed 3 times. Chief Braun slammed his fist on the table. "Detection is for cowards. We should fortify our strongest positions and meet them in honorable combat when they come." The Goliath's strategy was brave, straightforward, and had resulted in the complete destruction of 2 mining fleets. The collective's representative, a small drone speaking for billions, offered their perspective. Coordinated defense networks, spanning multiple systems, would provide overlapping coverage. This approach had protected exactly 0 of their colonies from annihilation. Each species presented solutions based on their strengths: advanced technology, overwhelming force, perfect coordination, energy manipulation. Every idea had been tried before. Every idea had failed. Admiral Thane looked around the room with growing frustration. "The Void Wraiths seem to anticipate our every move. They strike our most defended positions, avoid our trap fleets, and disappear before reinforcements arrive. We need something completely different." The room fell silent. Representatives exchanged glances, but no one had new ideas. The galaxy's greatest military minds were stumped by an enemy that refused to fight fair. What about the humans? The question came from General Lyra, who had noticed Rivers sitting quietly in the back. All eyes turned to the human commander, most showing surprise that Earth even had a representative present. Rivers stood slowly, his movements careful and controlled. "Earth volunteers for reconnaissance missions to study Wraith attack patterns, Chief." Braun snorted, a sound like grinding stone. Reconnaissance is not warfare, little human. This enemy requires strength and courage, not hiding in the shadows. With respect, Rivers replied calmly, every battle begins with understanding your enemy. We would like to observe how they operate before proposing solutions. The Luminary delegate pulsed with amused energy. Observe? These creatures phase between dimensions. They exist partially outside normal space-time. What could primitive sensors from a backwater world possibly detect that our advanced equipment cannot? Rivers didn't react to the insult. Sometimes a different perspective helps. We're willing to take the risk. Admiral Thane looked skeptical but desperate. The coalition was losing this war badly, and conventional approaches had achieved nothing. Very well. Earth will provide intelligence support, while our main forces prepare defensive positions. The A. Meeting continued for another hour with various species dividing responsibilities. The Altarians would design new sensor networks. The Goliaths would reinforce key systems with heavy weapons. The Collective would coordinate communication between fleets. The other major powers would contribute their specialized abilities. Earth got intelligence gathering, which everyone understood meant staying out of the real fighting. As the meeting ended, delegates filed out in small groups, discussing strategy and sharing resources. Rivers remained in his seat, making notes on his primitive datapad. General Lyra approached him, her crystalline form shimmering with curiosity. Commander Rivers, may I ask why your species volunteered for such a dangerous assignment? Intelligence gathering against the Void Wraiths is essentially a suicide mission. Rivers looked up from his notes. General, how long did it take your species to achieve spaceflight after first developing agriculture? The question seemed random, but Lyra answered politely. Approximately 8,000 years. We progressed through mathematics, then physics, then engineering in logical stages. The Goliaths took 12,000 years, Rivers continued. The Collective took 15,000. Most spacefaring species follow similar timelines. He closed his datapad and stood. Humans achieved spaceflight in less than 6,000 years after agriculture. We developed nuclear weapons before we fully understood nuclear physics. We built computers before we completely understood electricity. Lyra's form flickered with confusion. That seems inefficient, dangerous. It was both, Rivers agreed. But it taught us something important. Sometimes you have to act before you fully understand the situation. Sometimes you have to take risks that more sensible species wouldn't consider. He headed toward the exit, then paused. Earth didn't volunteer for intelligence gathering, General. We volunteered to hunt. As Rivers left the chamber, he activated his communication device and sent an encrypted message back to Earth. The text was simple but carried enormous. Implications for the war ahead. Authorization requested for Ghost Protocol. Target acquired. Beginning the hunt. 3 days later, the stealth ship Whisper departed from Luna Base with a crew of 12 humans and enough equipment to either solve the galaxy's greatest threat or disappear without a trace trying. The other coalition species barely noticed their departure, too busy preparing conventional defenses for an unconventional enemy. None of them understood that Earth's greatest weapon wasn't technology or firepower. It was the simple fact that humans had evolved as persistence hunters on a world where everything was trying to kill them. The Void Wraiths were about to discover what it meant to become prey to Earth's apex predators. The Kepler Nebula stretched across space like a wound in reality, its purple and gold gases swirling around dead stars and empty planets. 3 thriving colonies had called this region home until 2 weeks ago, when they simply vanished without sending a single distress signal. Now the nebula held only silence and the faint radiation signatures of destroyed civilizations. Maya Patel guided the Whisper through the outer edge of the nebula, her fingers dancing across manual controls that most spacefaring species had abandoned centuries ago. The ship itself looked like a piece of space junk. its hull covered in sensor-absorbing materials that made it invisible to most detection systems. Inside, 12 humans worked with equipment their alien allies would consider laughably primitive. "Tom, what are you seeing?" Maya asked, without taking her eyes off the navigation display. Sergeant Tom Walsh sat hunched over a collection of devices that looked more like camping gear than military equipment. His background tracking wildlife through Canada's northern forests had prepared him for reading signs that sophisticated computers missed. "Something's wrong with the radiation patterns around the second planet. The decay rates don't match what we should see from a standard orbital bombardment." Lieutenant Dan Foster looked up from his weapons analysis station. "The energy signatures are too clean. When the Goliaths destroy something, they leave plasma residue everywhere. When the Altarians fight, you get quantum interference patterns. This is different." The human crew had spent 3 days studying the attack sites, and they were starting to see things the Coalition's advanced sensors had missed. The Void Wraiths weren't just attacking randomly. They were following a specific pattern that required understanding both where they struck and what they took. "Maya, take us to the mining asteroid near Kepler 7, said Alex Rivers from the command chair. "I want to test a theory." The whisper drifted toward a small asteroid that had been completely stripped of its quantum minerals. The Coalition assumed the Wraiths were stealing resources, but Rivers suspected something more complex. As they approached, the ship's passive sensors began picking up trace elements that told a different story. Dr. Lisa Park, the team's physicist, ran her hands along sensor readings like she was reading Braille. "The quantum extraction patterns are too precise. They're not mining for resources. They're harvesting specific isotopes needed for dimensional technology." "Which means they're not just raiding," Rivers concluded. "They're preparing for something bigger. Tom, show me those radiation patterns again." Walsh pulled up his environmental readings on the main display. Where alien computers saw random energy signatures, his trained eye spotted the subtle signs that predators always leave behind. "Look at the timeline. The attacks aren't random. They're following a spiral pattern, moving from outer systems toward more populated areas. And each attack site shows microgravitational disturbances that repeat every 47 minutes. Foster whistled softly. "They're not just phasing between dimensions. They're anchored to something in normal space. The gravitational pulses are like a heartbeat, keeping them connected to our reality." Maya felt excitement building in her chest. This was exactly what humans did best. While other species relied on advanced technology to solve problems, humans used pattern recognition and persistence to understand their prey. If they're anchored, they're vulnerable. We just need to find the anchor points. The team spent the next 6 hours mapping gravitational anomalies across the nebula. What they discovered was both terrifying and promising. The Void Wraiths weren't just raiders from another dimension. They were an invasion force preparing to establish permanent bases in normal space. "They're building something," Dr. Park explained, as the data came together. "Each attack provides materials for dimensional stabilizers. Once they have enough quantum minerals, they can create permanent gateways between dimensions." Rivers studied the attack pattern with growing understanding. The Void Wraiths thought like humans in some ways. They were persistence hunters, too, slowly working toward a long-term goal instead of seeking quick victories. But they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed their prey was too primitive to recognize the pattern. "Where will they strike next?" he asked. Tom studied his environmental data like he was tracking a wounded animal through dense forest. Based on the quantum mineral concentrations and gravitational anchor points, they need one more major source. "The mining station at Proxima 3 has exactly what they're looking for." Maya ran quick calculations. "That's 16 hours away at maximum stealth speed. The Coalition won't listen if we warn them. They'll think we're being paranoid." "Then we don't. Warn them," Rivers decided. "We get there first and wait." The Whisper changed course, accelerating toward the Proxima system while maintaining complete sensor silence. The crew began preparing for something no human had ever attempted before. They were going to hunt creatures that existed partially outside normal reality. Foster started modifying their weapons, focusing on kinetic projectiles and electromagnetic pulse devices that would work regardless of dimensional phasing. Dr. Park calculated the exact moments when the Wraiths would be most vulnerable during their transition between dimensions. Walsh studied the environmental patterns that would tell them when their quarry was approaching. As they traveled through hyperspace, Maya reflected on what made this mission different from anything the Coalition had tried before. The other species approached the Void Wraiths as a military problem requiring technological solutions. But humans understood something important about hunting dangerous prey. You don't defeat a superior predator by being stronger or faster. You defeat it by being smarter, more patient, and more willing to take calculated risks. You study its behavior until you know it better than it knows itself. You wait for the perfect moment when it's vulnerable. Then you strike with everything you have. The Whisper dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima system, its hull cold and sensors passive. To any observer, they looked like another piece of space debris drifting through the void. The crew powered down all unnecessary systems and began their wait. "How long until they arrive?" Maya whispered, though sound couldn't travel through space. Tom studied his readings with the concentration of a hunter watching for movement in tall grass. "Based on their pattern, they'll phase in near the mining station in approximately 4 hours. But Maya, there's something else. The gravitational signatures are stronger here. This isn't just another raid." Rivers felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. "What do you mean?" "This is the final harvest," Dr. Park realized, checking her calculations twice. "They have enough materials now. After this attack, they'll have everything needed to establish permanent dimensional anchors. The invasion begins here." The crew looked at each other in the dim red light of emergency power. They had stumbled onto something much bigger than a reconnaissance mission. The fate of the entire galaxy might depend on 12 humans in a jury-rigged stealth ship, armed with primitive weapons and hunting instincts developed on a dangerous world far from civilization. Foster checked his improvised weapons one more time. "So no pressure, right?" Maya smiled grimly as she made final preparations for the most important ambush in galactic history. "Tom, when they arrive, I need you to tell me the exact moment they're most vulnerable. Dan, your weapons need to hit their anchor points simultaneously. Lisa, calculate their phase transition timing down to the microsecond." She turned to Rivers, who was studying the mining station through passive sensors. "Alex, once we start this, there's no going back. The entire galaxy will know what humans can do." Rivers nodded slowly. Earth was about to announce its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. "Good. It's time they learned that Deathworld humans don't just survive, we hunt." Space around Proxima 3 shimmered like heat waves rising from summer pavement, though the temperature here was nearly absolute zero. The mining station continued its automated operations, massive extraction arms pulling quantum minerals from the asteroid's core while robotic processors refined them into transportable forms. The station's crew of 200 aliens had no idea they were about to become the final target in a war they didn't even know was happening. Maya held the Whisper, in perfect position, drifting 3 kilometers from the station like a dead satellite. The ship's crew had been maintaining complete silence for 6 hours, communicating only through hand signals and shared glances. Every human aboard understood that the next few minutes would determine whether the galaxy survived or fell to an interdimensional invasion. Tom Walsh's instruments detected the first signs 20 minutes before visual confirmation. Gravitational fluctuations began dancing across his displays in the familiar pattern they had learned to recognize. "They're coming," he whispered into his throat microphone. "Phase transition beginning in 17 minutes. Dr. Lisa Park's fingers flew across her calculations, mapping the exact moments when the void wraiths would exist fully in normal space. I've got the vulnerability windows. They'll be completely solid for 2.3 seconds during initial materialization, then partially solid for 15-second intervals while they establish dimensional anchors. Dan Foster made final adjustments to his improvised weapons array. Instead of energy beams or plasma cannons, he had modified the ship's systems to fire dense metal slugs at incredible velocity. The kinetic weapons looked primitive compared to galactic standards, but they would work regardless of what dimension their targets occupied. Rivers watched the empty space where his instincts told him the enemy would appear. The waiting was the hardest part, but humans had evolved for this moment. Every ancestor who had crouched in tall grass waiting for the perfect shot, every hunter who had tracked dangerous prey across impossible terrain, every human who had survived, by being more patient than their enemies, had prepared him for this. The void wraiths materialized exactly where Tom had predicted. They looked like living shadows made of purple energy, roughly humanoid, but constantly shifting between solid and translucent. Their ships resembled crystalline insects, all angles and sharp edges that seemed to cut through space itself. 3 vessels appeared around the mining station, immediately beginning their harvesting sequence. Maya watched through the ship's passive sensors as the wraiths started their work. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered. Effective resistance. Energy beams sliced through the station's hull like it was made of paper. Gravitational manipulators began extracting quantum minerals with surgical precision. They're establishing anchors now, Dr. Park reported. Dimensional stability increasing. In approximately 90 seconds, they'll be locked into normal space for the harvesting sequence. The human crew watched their enemy work, learning everything they could before striking. The void wraiths operated like a perfectly coordinated team, each ship handling a specific part of the harvesting process. They communicated through quantum entanglement, sharing information faster than light across interdimensional space. Maya, Tom said quietly, the gravitational patterns are different this time. They're not just harvesting, they're preparing to install something permanent. Rivers felt his blood turn cold as he realized what they were witnessing. The dimensional gateway. This is where they plan to establish their permanent foothold in our reality. The mining station's emergency alarms began screaming as the crew finally understood what was happening. Escape pods launched in all directions as aliens fled for their lives. The void wraiths ignored them completely, focused entirely on their dimensional construction project. Foster tracked the enemy ships through his targeting system, waiting for the perfect moment. Anchors stabilizing now. They're committing to full materialization in 15 seconds. Maya's hands hovered over the ship's controls. Everything depended on timing and coordination that no other species in the galaxy could match. The Altarians would have tried to solve this mathematically. The Goliaths would have charged in with overwhelming force. The collective would have attempted perfect synchronization across multiple ships. Humans did something different. They trusted instinct, experience, and the kind of patience that could only be learned on a world where mistakes meant death. Tom, confirm the vulnerability window. Confirmed. Full materialization in 3 seconds. Lisa, targeting coordinates locked. All 3 anchor points calculated and confirmed. Dan, weapons ready. Kinetic penetrators loaded and aimed. Rivers made the final decision. Maya, take us in. It's time to show them what Deathworld humans can do. The whisper came alive with sudden violence. Maya fired the engines at maximum power, accelerating the ship directly toward the largest void wraith vessel. At the same moment, Foster launched. Every weapon they had at precisely calculated points on all 3 enemy ships. The void wraiths had faced the galaxy's most advanced militaries and won every battle through superior technology and dimensional manipulation. But they had never encountered enemies who attacked during the exact microsecond window when their defenses were useless. Dense metal slugs traveling at incredible velocity slammed into dimensional anchor points just as the wraiths finished materializing. The impacts disrupted quantum fields that kept the enemy ship stable in normal space. Instead of being able to phase back to safety, the Void Wraiths found themselves trapped in reality with 12 very angry humans bearing down on them. Tater, lead Wraith ship tried to activate its energy weapons, but the humans were already inside its minimum firing range. Maya piloted the Whisper with the skill of someone who had learned to fly in Earth's chaotic atmosphere, dodging between energy beams that could have vaporized them instantly. Foster continued firing kinetic weapons with mathematical precision, each shot targeting structural points that Dr. Park had identified as critical to dimensional stability. The Void Wraith's advanced armor meant nothing against simple physics applied at the exactly right moment. Tom monitored enemy communications, translating the quantum entanglement signals they were intercepting. They're calling for reinforcements, but the dimensional disruption is blocking their transmissions. They're trapped here with us. The battle lasted exactly 47 seconds. When it was over, 2 Void Wraith ships were completely destroyed, and the third was drifting powerless, with its dimensional systems offline. The mining station was damaged but intact, its crew staring in amazement at the small human ship that had just accomplished the impossible. Rivers activated the ship's communication system and broadcast on all Coalition frequencies. "This is Commander, Alex Rivers of Earth Vessel Whisper. We have successfully engaged and defeated Void Wraith forces at Proxima 3. Recommend immediate salvage operations to recover enemy technology." Maya looked at the debris field around them, where pieces of interdimensional technology floated among ordinary metal fragments. "Think they'll believe us?" Dr. Park was already analyzing the quantum fragments they had captured, her excitement obvious despite the exhaustion in her voice. "These energy signatures will prove everything we've discovered about their dimensional anchor system. More importantly, we now know how to detect and disrupt their phase transitions." Foster checked his weapon systems, already thinking about improvements for the next encounter. "They won't make the same mistakes twice. Next time they'll be expecting us." Tom smiled as he monitored space around them for signs of additional Wraith activity. "Good. That means they're learning to fear us. Any prey animal that starts fearing the hunter has already lost." Rivers looked at his crew, these 12 humans who had just changed the course of galactic history through patience, observation, and perfect timing. The Coalition had tried to fight the Void Wraiths like civilized armies engaging in honorable combat. But humans understood something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes survival required becoming the thing your enemies feared most. Sometimes you had to embrace the predator instincts that evolution had given you. Sometimes the best way to protect civilization was to remind everyone why humans had clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain. The emergency beacon from Proxima Station finally reached Coalition forces, and within hours the system was crawling with alien warships investigating reports of a successful engagement with Void Wraith forces. But by then, the Whisper had already disappeared back into the shadows of space, hunting for the next target in humanity's private war against interdimensional invaders. The war room aboard Omega Point had become a museum of failure. Holographic displays showed the locations of 17 destroyed star systems, while scattered reports described impossible human victories that nobody quite believed. Admiral Thane stared at the quantum fragments recovered from Proxima 3, physical proof that the unstoppable Void Wraiths could indeed be stopped by 12 humans in a modified cargo ship. General Lyra's crystalline form pulsed with confusion as she studied the battle recordings. The tactical analysis makes no mathematical sense. They engaged 3 superior vessels at point-blank range with primitive kinetic weapons. According to all strategic models, they should have been vaporized instantly. Chief Braun slammed his massive fist on the conference table, causing several smaller delegates to jump. "Perhaps our models are wrong, Crystal Singer. Perhaps there is more to warfare than mathematical probability and energy calculations. The Goliath warrior's admission carried extra weight because his species valued strength above all else. If Chief Braun was questioning traditional military thinking, the situation had become truly desperate. Commander Rivers stood at the center of the room, looking exhausted but determined. His simple gray uniform was stained with machine oil and space dust, making him seem even more primitive compared to the elegant aliens surrounding him. But the quantum fragments on the table proved that primitive didn't mean ineffective. The void wraiths operate on predictable patterns, Rivers explained for the third time. They require dimensional anchor points to maintain stability in normal space. Disrupt those anchors during the vulnerability window, and they become trapped where we can engage them with conventional weapons. Admiral Thane's four arms moved in frustrated gestures. But how did your species identify these patterns when our most advanced sensors detected nothing? Rivers glanced around the room, seeing the same expression on every alien face. They wanted a technological explanation, something they could understand and replicate with better equipment. They couldn't grasp that the answer was much simpler and much more difficult to copy. We observed them, he said finally. We watched how they moved, when they attacked, what they took. We treated them like prey animals instead of military opponents. The collective's representative, a small insectoid drone, spoke with the voice of billions. Prey animals? The Void Wraiths are clearly an advanced civilization with sophisticated technology. Your comparison is illogical. Dr. Park stepped forward, carrying data tablets filled with hunting analysis. Every predator follows behavioral patterns, regardless of intelligence or technology. Territory markers, feeding schedules, vulnerability periods. The Void Wraiths are apex predators, which means they've never learned to hide their patterns from other hunters. General Lyra's form flickered with interest. You're suggesting they became overconfident due to lack of effective opposition? Exactly, Rivers confirmed. They evolved in a dimension where they had no natural enemies. When they entered our reality, they maintained the same behaviors that made them successful at home. But those behaviors also made them predictable to species that evolved alongside other predators. Chief Braun leaned forward, his stone-like features showing genuine curiosity. You speak of evolution and predators. Tell me, human, what kind of world produces hunters capable of stalking interdimensional raiders? Rivers activated his portable hologram display, showing images of Earth that made several delegates gasp in horror. Massive predators with razor-sharp teeth hunting in coordinated packs. Venomous creatures hiding in perfect camouflage. Natural disasters that could wipe out entire ecosystems without warning. Earth is what we call a death world, Rivers explained. Everything there is trying to kill everything else. Humans survived by becoming better hunters than anything else on the planet. We learned to read behavioral patterns, coordinate group attacks, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy's civilizations had evolved on worlds where conflict was rare and survival was relatively easy. They had developed technology and culture without the constant pressure of avoiding death every single day. Humans had learned to survive in hell, and that made them uniquely qualified to hunt demons. Commander Rivers, Admiral Thane said slowly, how would you recommend we proceed against the Void Wraiths? Train your forces to think like hunters instead of soldiers, Rivers replied immediately. Soldiers follow orders and use superior technology to win battles. Hunters study their prey, identify weaknesses, and strike when the enemy is most vulnerable. General Lyra's mathematical mind struggled with the concept. But how do we quantify instinctive behavior? How do we program hunting instincts into our combat algorithms? You can't, Dr. Park said gently. Hunting isn't about algorithms or technology. It's about patience, observation, and the willingness to take calculated risks. We need to train your people the same way human children learn to hunt, through practice, repetition, and learning from mistakes. Chief Braun stood to his full impressive height. My warriors are willing to learn any technique that brings victory. What would this training involve? Rivers smiled for the first time since entering the room. We start with the basics. How to track prey through environmental changes. How to read behavioral patterns. How to coordinate attacks without complex communication systems. Most importantly, how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Over the next week, the coalition's leadership slowly accepted what their pride had initially rejected. The galaxy's most advanced militaries needed to learn primitive hunting techniques from a species they had considered backwards. The irony was not lost on anyone, but survival trumped ego. The training program began on Desolation, an abandoned moon that resembled Earth's hostile environment. Human instructors worked with alien warriors, teaching them to see warfare through predator instincts rather than technological superiority. The results were mixed but promising. Goliath warriors struggled with patience, preferring direct confrontation to careful stalking. The Altarians had difficulty trusting instinct over mathematical analysis. The collective couldn't understand individual initiative when group mind. Coordination seemed more efficient. But slowly, breakthrough moments began occurring. A young Goliath named Stone learned to move silently through dense terrain, discovering that stealth could be more satisfying than brute force. An Altarian mathematician named Prime realized that probability theory could be combined with pattern recognition to predict enemy behavior. A collective subgroup started operating independently, making tactical decisions without consulting the hive mind. The most important lesson was patience. Every alien species had evolved expecting immediate solutions to problems. Humans had learned that sometimes you had to wait days or weeks for the right opportunity to strike. This fundamental difference in thinking began reshaping how the coalition approached warfare. Maya Patel worked with mixed crews, teaching them to pilot ships like hunters tracking prey through three-dimensional space. Tom Walsh showed them how to read environmental signs that computers missed. Dan Foster demonstrated weapon modifications that prioritized effectiveness over elegance. The training culminated when reconnaissance ships detected a massive void wraith fleet massing near the Galactic core. Long-range sensors showed dozens of enemy vessels preparing for what appeared to be a final assault on Coalition space. This would be the ultimate test of whether the galaxy could learn to hunt its hunters. Admiral Thane assembled the largest military force in Coalition history, but instead of charging into battle with overwhelming technology, they would approach like predators stalking dangerous prey. Human advisors were assigned to every ship, teaching crews to think like pack hunters rather than individual warriors. The fleet moved toward the Galactic core, not as conquerors seeking glorious victory, but as Earth's apex predators preparing to remind the universe why Deathworld humans had survived when everything else on their planet was bigger, stronger, and more dangerous. The final hunt was about to begin, and for the first time since the war started, the Coalition forces were genuinely excited about their chances of survival. The Galactic core burned with the light of 1 billion stars, but something darker lurked in the spaces between them. Long-range sensors detected the Void Wraith mothership, a structure so massive it bent space-time around itself like a black hole, made of crystalline energy. Around it, dozens of smaller vessels moved in patterns that suggested preparation for total war. Maya piloted her ship through the Coalition fleet, marveling at how different everything looked compared to 6 months ago. Instead of neat formations designed for maximum firepower, the ships moved in loose hunting patterns. Goliath heavy cruisers drifted like patient predators, their crews finally understanding that waiting for the right moment was more important than charging into battle. Altarian science vessels used their mathematical precision to calculate not just weapon trajectories, but behavioral patterns and psychological weaknesses. The most dramatic change was in the command structure. Instead of Admiral Thane issuing orders from a central location, decision-making had been distributed throughout the fleet. Each ship group operated like a hunting pack, with human advisors teaching alien crews to trust their instincts while maintaining overall coordination. Rivers stood in the command center of the flagship, watching display screens that showed the entire battlefield. The Void Wraith mothership wasn't just a military target. According to their intelligence, it served as the dimensional anchor for their entire invasion force. Destroy it, and every Wraith ship in normal space would be pulled back to their home dimension. "Tom, what are you reading from their formation?" Rivers asked. Tom Walsh studied environmental data with the concentration of a tracker following year-old footprints. "They're confident, maybe overconfident. The mothership is protected by defensive layers, but they're positioned for offense, not defense. They expect to attack, not be attacked." Dr. Park looked up from her calculations, excitement clear in her voice. "The dimensional anchor creates massive gravitational distortions. If we can disrupt it at exactly the right moment, the mothership will tear itself apart trying to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Chief Braun's voice came through the communication system from his position leading the heavy assault group. "Human Rivers, my warriors are ready to prove that strength combined with cunning is superior to strength alone." General Lyra's musical tones followed from her position coordinating the science vessels. "Mathematical models confirm the attack. Plan has a 73.6% probability of success. However, success depends entirely on timing that cannot be calculated in advance." The collective's multiple voices chimed in from their distributed positions throughout the fleet. Individual initiative protocols are active, each ship group prepared to act independently while maintaining pack coordination. Rivers felt the weight of command in a way that no alien species could understand. He wasn't just leading a military operation. He was coordinating the largest hunting party in galactic history, bringing together predator instincts from dozens of different worlds against prey that had never been successfully hunted before. "All ships, begin the approach," Rivers commanded. "Remember, we're not attacking a fortress. We're surrounding prey that doesn't know it's being hunted." The Coalition fleet moved toward the Void Wraith formation using tactics no military academy had ever taught. Instead of advancing in straight lines, they curved around gravity wells and asteroid fields, using natural cover to mask their approach. Ships that had always fought in rigid formations now moved like wolves circling a wounded deer. The Void Wraiths detected the approaching fleet when they were still 3 hours away, but they responded exactly as the humans had predicted. The enemy ships moved into defensive positions around their mothership, preparing for the kind of direct assault that had failed repeatedly throughout the war. Maya smiled as she watched the enemy deployment through passive sensors. "They're making the same mistake every overconfident predator makes. They think they know what kind of fight this is going to be." The first phase of the attack began when the Void Wraiths were exactly where the Coalition needed them to be. Chief Braun's heavy assault group appeared at maximum weapons range, firing everything they had at the enemy's outer defensive line. The massive Goliath ships charged forward with their traditional battle roar, drawing all enemy attention toward what appeared to be another failed frontal assault. But this time, the charge was coordinated with something the Void Wraiths had never encountered before. While the enemy focused on the obvious threat, dozens of smaller ships moved through their blind spots like shadows. Human-trained crews used stealth approaches that relied on patience and environmental awareness rather than advanced cloaking technology. Tom directed the infiltration teams through gaps in the enemy formation that only someone who understood predator behavior could see. "Second wave, move in now. They're focused on the Goliaths. You have maybe 90 seconds before they realize what's happening." The Altarian science vessels emerged from behind asteroid cover, their elegant forms moving with mathematical precision toward specific points around the mothership. But instead of attacking with energy weapons, they deployed the kind of simple, effective tools that humans had taught them to appreciate: gravitational mines, kinetic penetrators, and electromagnetic pulse devices that would work regardless of dimensional phasing. General Lyra's voice carried new confidence as she coordinated the attack. Targeting dimensional anchor points now. Mathematical precision combined with predator instincts is proving highly effective. The Void Wraiths finally realized they were fighting a completely different kind of enemy when collective ships emerged. From positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected, the hive mind species had learned to operate in small, independent groups that could make instant decisions without consulting the larger collective consciousness. Individual initiative is proving superior to group coordination in this tactical situation, the collective reported with something resembling amazement. We are experiencing what humans call thinking for ourselves, and find it both terrifying and effective. The mothership's defenses began responding to threats from multiple directions simultaneously, but the Void Wraiths had never faced an enemy that attacked like a coordinated hunting pack. Every time they focused on one group of ships, another group struck from an unexpected angle. Dr. Park monitored the dimensional anchor's stability from her position aboard the Whisper. Gravitational distortions are increasing. The mothership is having trouble maintaining dimensional coherence under multiple stress points. Rivers watched the battle unfold with the satisfaction of a huntmaster seeing his plan work perfectly. The coalition forces weren't just winning. They were demonstrating that superior technology meant nothing against opponents who understood their prey better than the prey understood itself. All ships, execute final phase, Rivers commanded. Time to show them what happens when Deathworld. Predators get serious. The assault reached its climax when every coalition ship struck simultaneously at precisely calculated points around the mothership. The attack wasn't designed to destroy the massive vessel through firepower. Instead, it was intended to destabilize the dimensional anchor at the exact moment when the Void Wraiths were most vulnerable. The mothership began tearing itself apart as competing gravitational forces pulled it in multiple directions. The Void Wraiths tried desperately to retreat to their home dimension, but the humans had timed the attack perfectly. The dimensional anchor collapsed just as enemy ships were transitioning between realities, trapping them in a space that existed in both dimensions and neither. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away as the mothership collapsed into a singularity that immediately evaporated, taking most of the Void Wraith fleet with it. The surviving enemy ships found themselves completely cut off from their home dimension, vulnerable to conventional weapons and completely demoralized. The battle that had been expected to last for days was over in less than 4 hours. Admiral Thane's voice came through the communication system, filled with amazement and gratitude. All ships, stand down. The Void Wraith threat has been eliminated. Commander Rivers, on behalf of the entire coalition, I formally request that Earth be granted full membership with voting rights and military command authority. Maya looked around the bridge of the Whisper, where 12 humans had started a war that ended with the galaxy's most dangerous enemy completely defeated. Think they finally understand what we're capable of? Rivers smiled as he watched coalition ships moving to secure the battlefield. They're beginning to, but more importantly, they're learning that survival isn't about having the best technology or the strongest weapons. It's about understanding your enemy and being willing to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Tom was already analyzing the debris field for signs of additional Void Wraith technology. The environmental pattern suggests this was their entire invasion force. No signs of reinforcements or secondary bases. Dr. Park confirmed the victory through her scientific analysis. Dimensional readings are returning to normal throughout the region. The gateway between realities has been permanently sealed. Foster checked his weapons systems with the satisfaction of a craftsman whose tools had performed perfectly. Not bad for primitive kinetic weapons and human stubbornness. As the coalition fleet began the journey home, Rivers composed his final report on the war that had changed everything. The galaxy had learned that Earth wasn't just another member world with useful resources. It was the home of apex predators, who had earned their place at the top of the food chain through millions of years of evolution on a world that gave no second chances. The void wraiths were gone, but their defeat had taught the galaxy something more valuable than victory. Sometimes the most advanced civilizations needed to remember that underneath all their technology and culture, survival still came down to the ancient art of the hunt. Human training academies were established on dozens of worlds, where the galaxy's defenders learned patience, observation, and the willingness to strike from the shadows. Earth's greatest export wasn't minerals or manufactured goods. It was the knowledge of how to think like a predator when civilization itself was prey. The war was over, but the real victory was just beginning. The galaxy had gained more than a new ally. It had learned that sometimes the most primitive world produces the most sophisticated hunters, and that true strength comes not from superior firepower, but from understanding exactly when and how to use it. In the end, the Void Wraiths had made a fatal mistake. They had tried to hunt in a galaxy that contained Deathworld humans, and humans had never learned to be anything other than apex predators.